Good morning. I'm Janet Gollery-McKithen, and I am the minister here, and I welcome you to the church in Ocean Park. Woo! This is a multi-faith, multi-religious congregation, so you're welcome if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're Hindu, if you're Ifa, Buddhist, atheist, or some combination or something else altogether. You're welcome if you're married, divorced, widowed, gay, transgender, non-binary, very rich, or living on the edge. We welcome you if you're fidgety, or you're very focused, or you can't stop walking around, or you can't stop laying down. We don't care if you're more religious than the Pope, or you haven't been to the mosque since before the pandemic. We welcome soccer moms, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegans, junk food eaters, and people who are addicted. We welcome you no matter what your journey has been and what has led you here. We welcome you if you thought you were going to a regular United Methodist church and you're still looking around for the pastor. Or if you thought you were coming to a champagne brunch. We welcome you if you're depressed and sad about the fact that ICE seems to be able to be ICE does whatever they want. Or if you're hopeful because you see the helping people who are helping people. We welcome you if you're having problems or you're soaring on the eagle's wings. We especially welcome you if you're standing in the need of prayer. And who isn't right now? Who isn't right now? We welcome you if you've been hurt by organized religion and are here tentatively. We hope this will be a place of healing and of hope for you. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. We're glad you're here. We want to begin by acknowledging that we are sitting on stolen land in Santa Monica. This land was stolen from the Chumash, the Quiche, and the Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the harms of genocide, forced assimilation, and enslavement and destruction at the hands of U.S. settler colonialism. We also acknowledge that our communities and our country was built on the backs of people who were stolen from Africa, placed into bondage, and then forced into labor, and that we benefit from that labor every single day. In our acknowledgement, let us commit ourselves to healing by helping to create a more just and equitable world, by changing the way we do things that are harmful, but are the way that we normally do things. We all have biases, and it takes intentionality to build compassion for people whose lives are different from ours. And at the church in Ocean Park, we seek to work across boundaries intentionally to get to know people whose lives are different from ours and build compassionate relationships of healing and of love. This morning you'll hear from a variety of people. If you hear from somebody something that doesn't make sense to you or you don't like or is not something that you believe, just know that your voice is just as important as whoever just spoke. Every morning that we meet, we begin with the Thich Nhat Hanh chant. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now, 3 times. Let's take a deep breath. Let it out. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. We're glad that you're here. And I'm glad that this morning is an incredible day. I'm really looking forward to it because our good friends are here. Reverend Dr. Alexia Salvatierra will be speaking. And Dave Morrison will be playing his guitar. And Dave has been a distinctive voice in Southern California music scene for 30 years, probably 35 by now, with his evocative songs and exciting live shows. And lately, they've been doing incredible things with their music. They've been raising money for tiny houses and other things. And so I hope you'll hear some about that today. But we're very grateful that Dave Morrison is going to play you some songs.
Thank you, Pastor Janet. So, yeah, we just did a benefit for an organization that provides services and meals for those tiny home villages that have begun to sprout up different places. It's transitional interim housing, which I think is really, really needed. And it's a big job they have. They serve 7,800 meals every day. So we're trying to throw some money at them when we can. But I had this in my mind, and I was walking around my area in Highland Park, where there are quite a few people living on the streets. And these songs just started coming to me. So I got 2 songs in like 2 weeks, which is not part of my normal experience. And it's also not part of my normal experience to then be expected to perform them in front of people while I'm still trying to master them and remember where I know all the words, just not what order they come in. That's all I'm saying, you know. So if I pause for effect, just pretend that it's for effect. It's really my memory failing me. Did I mention I'm 70 years old? So please understand me. So this is called Christmas Eve in Shantytown. It's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. The last leaves of fall are all blowing around. Lights on the tent poles, they twinkle us home, thanks to a dumpster battery from AutoZone. There'll be no Christmas goose for me and the crew, but there's car trunk tamales and mulligan stew, and a quart of Old English to wash it all down. It's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. Tommy looked good in his window tonight as we caroled below in the parking lot light. He waltzed a few steps with his ivy rack. The nurse blew us kisses as she took Tommy back. On the footbridge back home, it pretended to snow. You threw hands full of glitter to the freeway below. The cars flashed their lights in your make-believe storm, and we swayed and we hummed with you safe in my arms. La-di-dee, 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 la-di-da. You sang joy to the world with a tear in your eye. La-di-dee, la-di-up, la-di-dee, la-di-down. It's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. And it's peace on earth, goodwill to men, and a mere cup of kindness until then. This indifferent world keeps spinning round, and it's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. So if you've got a little extra, be good to a stranger. Imagine him sleeping away in a manger, with no star above him to show us the way. No gifts and no magi, and on Christmas Day, not a coin in his pocket, no room at the inn. Imagine how you'd feel if you were just him. With no one to come looking where you might be found. Still it's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. It's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. La-di-di, 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 la-di-di. It's Christmas Eve in Shantytown. Thank you.
That was that song's debut, you guys. We're very privileged. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Reverend Dr. Alexia Salvatierra is a Lutheran pastor, scholar, and national leader in faith-based justice work with over 40 years of experience in congregational and community ministry. She serves as academic dean of the Center for Study of Hispanic Church and Community and associate professor of mission and global transformation at Fuller Theological Seminary. And she's the author of several influential books on faith-rooted organizing and immigrant justice. A longtime organizer and consultant, she has co-founded major initiatives, including the Evangelical Immigration Table, the New Sanctuary Movement, and Mateo 25. From 2000 to 2011, she was the executive director of Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, or CLU, beginning as the director of CLU in Los Angeles, and then as the first CLU California director. Under Alexia's leadership, CLU California became known for its Young Leaders Project, the New Sanctuary Movement, and Our Children Project in Orange County, which engaged immigrant and non-immigrant evangelical congregations in joint ministry to immigrant youth facing deportation. Before CLU California, she founded multiple programs and organizations in the United States and overseas. These included a gang prevention program for at-risk immigrant youth, a community computer center, an intergenerational community garden where elderly taught at-risk youth to grow produce for sale, as well as a collaborative of UC students, homeless leaders, and congregation members providing emergency services in the streets of Santa Cruz, and the migrant farm worker camps in Watsonville. She was the founding director of the Berkeley Ecumenical Chaplaincy to the Homeless, a program that was replicated in 6 U.S. cities. And then in the Philippines, she trained urban poor women in Manila to serve as chaplains to their neighbors. Her work has focused on immigration, working poverty, and community development, and has earned her numerous national awards for leadership and social impact. She's done much more than that. And besides that, she's a lot of fun, and she really likes dancing. Welcome, Dr. Alexia.
You know, I'm turning 70 this year, too, and if you're on the planet for a long time, it sounds impressive when somebody says, but you can't even remember half of what you've done, right? It's just sort of a long time ago. So, I think many of us this last week have been thinking about the time last year when thousands of us in this area lost our homes. Although, of course, we don't refer to them as the homeless. But it is true that a number of people I know who did lose their homes have become sensitized in a very different way to the reality that we have thousands and thousands of people living on the street right now. And so Dave and I have also been involved, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, in understanding what are the most effective efforts right now in our region to respond to that and trying to support them. So I will talk about that. But I just want to say first that many of you may have thought that I was going to talk about immigration. And it is really true right now that to be an immigrant in Los Angeles County or anywhere in this country is to fear that you might lose your home at any moment. So that is a different kind of homelessness that we're dealing with. But I really felt like I wanted, since Dave and I are sharing this time, to really focus in on homelessness. And as you heard from Janet's long story, I did work with unhoused people for 14 years, from 1978 to 1992. And that was a very pivotal time for changes that are still impacting us now. So in 1978, we had just been through the hippie movement. Some of you may remember that. Some of you may not have been born. But in 1978, a lot of people in the society thought that people were on the street voluntarily, but most of them had left. And the people who were still on the street had had a bad acid trip that they never recovered from, or had just lost their way and were having trouble coming back into society. And so that's initially a lot of the people we were working with in Santa Cruz, California. But then something else happened. There was a shift in mental health policy, actually in the 1970s, that really became widespread when Reagan became the president in 1981. But it was a shift away from mental hospitals to community-based care, which actually, if we had been able to do it, would have been a very good thing. But there wasn't sufficient funding, and there was NIMBY. Everyone thought it was a good idea in someone else's community. And so floods of people were thrown out of the mental health hospitals, and they were on the street. And so we needed to respond to that. And as we were designing ways to respond to that, something else happened, which is suddenly there were more and more people who were working and living in their cars. And there were more and more families. And this had a lot to do with the fact that funding for affordable housing stopped. But it also had to do with a cultural change that we're still dealing with today. Back then, we called it the me generation. When I was first working with mentally ill people on the street, you would find someone, you would realize that they were from Kansas, and you would call their family and you would say, come get them. And they would say, oh, it's so good to know where she is. We had lost her. We'll be right there. 5 years later, we would call and they would say, you know, I care about my sister, but I have my own life to live. Real shift. And what many people don't realize is one of the reasons why we lost funding for affordable housing was because if you're not going to respond to your sister, you're certainly not going to want your tax dollars to go to respond to people you don't know or care about. So I started to realize, watching all these changes, I started to develop a theory about why people were on the street. And of course, that's as different why any person is on the street from one person to another as you can imagine. Homeless people are as different from each other as the rest of us. But there's a commonality. And the commonality is that people end up on the street because you run into a series of crises. Some of them come out of your own problems or bad decisions. Some of them are completely external to you, like a medical crisis. But a series of crises that you don't have a sufficient support network to help you deal with. There are people who meet all those same crises who are not on the street because they either have a family support network or money, which is a support network in itself, or a government support network. Some kind of support network that is sufficient to deal with the particular crises you've encountered. But that's not why people stay on the street. People stay on the street because of what happens to you once you can't lock a door. So people on the street deteriorate to the point where it becomes almost impossible to internally have the capacity to come off the street. Well, just about the time that I began to understand that, I ended up going to the Philippines for 3 years as a missionary. And in that process, I worked with urban poor squatters. Now, those are also people that don't have homes. Very different situation. In that context, mostly they were people who had been tenant farmers, and then large multinational corporations had turned that land into plantations and had kicked them off the land. And so they went to the big cities, and they lived around the big cities in these communities in shacks. That's where we were working. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but in that context, we were able to develop a program that created a community of mutual support, that they supported each other and also supported other people in the barrios, and in the process healed. And were able to make changes not only for themselves individually and for their community, but also to fight for larger change. So I got to be part of that experience for 3 years, and I brought it back. And we formed in Berkeley the Berkeley Ecumenical Chaplaincy to the Homeless, which was it was a training program for homeless peer chaplains who saw themselves as agents of change and service in their community. And the combination of that, with them becoming a support network for each other, with the healing techniques that we developed in the program in the Philippines, meant that we developed all kinds of projects. And I'm saying they were the leaders, then surrounded by non-homeless people who supported them. And we had small businesses. And we had transitional housing where we rehabbed, if anyone's heard of Habitat for Humanity. We rehabbed houses that were falling apart in West Berkeley and West Oakland. And so we had transitional housing, we had small businesses, we had a street theater project, we had a counseling center, and all of these led by people who were unhoused and in the process of becoming housed. We had a track record of 75% of the people getting off the street. And we didn't cherry pick. These were people who were mentally ill, who were addicted, who were short-term, long-term homeless. We ended up doing it in 6 cities, but there was a problem with it. It was very time-intensive. It was very energy-intensive. And now the problem of being unhoused is at a level where you can't do things that are very time-intensive all over the country. So we started thinking, I mean, Dave has mentioned several times, so I don't mind mentioning it, but he lost his home. And so he feels all of this very deeply and personally. And so we started looking around the country and looking around Los Angeles for who's doing the most effective work. And we ran into this tiny home project. The Tiny Home Project is actually an extremely interesting collaboration between business, that people have figured out ways to make these tiny homes that are very inexpensive, and the government, who helps find areas where they can be built, like the city of Los Angeles is very involved, and providers who come in and accompany people in very comprehensive ways while they're there. And they get to be there. I love this part. They get to be there as long as they need to be while they're finding a solution for them. So they accompany them intimately. And the best group that we found that does that is called Hope the Mission. So that's why we did a big bend. They're called Hope the Mission. Hope the Mission. And if anybody's interested, we can send out a QR code for donation because we really believe in them. They're doing amazing work. The only part that's missing from what they do, I mean, if you've seen the tiny homes, they're beautiful. Some of them are painted. And they give people privacy and dignity, and they give them an enormous amount of personalized support. And they have a very good track record of helping people. Of course, there's 2 pieces missing. And I don't know enough to know whether those are even in process of being built, because I love these people. But one of them is that they don't engage people in a clear way in helping others. Because what we found in the Philippines and the work I did here is that part of how you regain yourself is by being an agent of change, positive change for other people. So I don't know if they do that or if they're beginning to do that. And they also then don't work on larger advocacy. But the advocacy was organic in what we did, because once people have that kind of community and begin to heal, then they want to change not only for themselves, but for their world. So what does this all have to do with you? The way that I understand sermons is they're not ever just about what's happening out there and how you can support it. When we were doing the homeless chaplaincy, the very first one in Berkeley, there was a woman who'd been on the street a long time, and we were doing a presentation for a church, and she said, actually, I'm not homeless anymore, even though we actually hadn't gotten the transitional housing started yet. She said, I'm houseless, but I'm not homeless, because I have a home in this community. And as I was thinking about her and I was thinking about that, I thought about the posadas. How many of you have heard of or experienced a posada here? Just a couple. A posada is a ritual that actually goes back to Spain in the 1600s. It's been around a long time. But it's a Christmas event. They're all over Los Angeles. If you hear about it, you may want to participate in one. What happens is that people dress up as Mary and Joseph. And sometimes there's a fake camel, that they ride, or donkey. Anyhow, and then there's people who dress as angels and wise men, and it's a lot of fun. But you literally go through the streets of the city, and there's certain homes that are prepared ahead of time that you knock on the door. And there's an ancient little chant that you sing back and forth where you say, excuse me, my wife's about to give birth. We have nowhere to stay. Can we stay with you? And the people inside say no. And they each say no differently as you go to each house, and they're very funny. And traditionally, these houses often have signs in the front that say banks or ice or like who would be rejecting people right now, right? And so you bring it into the present time. But the part that I was thinking of in a posada is that at the very end you come back to the church and you fling open the doors and you have a party, and there's this very joyous song that you sing. And in the song that you sing, you say, we see you even if the world doesn't. We see you. We know that you are sent by God. And we have a home for you in our hearts. All of us need to have people who have a home for us in their heart. Even if we are homed, we are still homeless until we have people who have a home for us in their heart. And I believe that that's what you all are doing here. You are about providing a community where people have a home in your hearts. I want to just celebrate that in a world where there's not a lot to celebrate at the moment, where it feels like there's not. I want to celebrate that you're doing that. And then I want to encourage you to think about how you can do it more. And I just want to suggest 3 different ways. The first way is just to be conscious. I love that you always start out talking about welcoming everybody. There are people that are very hard for us to welcome, let's be real. So just thinking about, well, who is that? Who are the people that are hard for you to welcome? And how do you welcome them? That's the first one. The second one is sometimes you hide your light under a bushel church in Ocean Park. You're not very evangelical about what you have to offer, right? You have a lot to offer. So what does it mean to reach out and to do that? And that's partly inviting people to come here and have a home in your hearts. But it's also just speaking that word out there wherever you go, that we desperately need, all of us, a community and a society where people are held in each other's hearts, where there is a home for everyone. So thank you that's all I wanted to share for now, and thank you for inviting me.
we get to hear again from Dave, and while he goes to say that one, I just want to mention we have had a posada here. I mean, it ended here when the car wash workers, we were trying to unionize them and they did get unionized, and they ended up here, and we had a great piñata hanging from right there. You can hang piñatas in this. Yes, it was a great piñata hanging. So yeah, I have a great picture of it filled with all different kinds of people, different ages, different ethnicities, different cultures, and all of them. And we did the song back. And
one of my earliest experiences of Alexia was we started putting on shows down here, and I think it may be the first one we did. This is many years ago, and it was raining cats and dogs and cold. It was about this time of year. And Alexia probably won't even remember this because it's so in keeping with what she does casually, but we were going out the front door, and it was the end of the evening. We're kind of cleaning up and stuff, and we're going out the front door, the two of us, and we're talking, as we usually are. We're animatedly talking about something. And there was a person huddled outside the front door, just staying out of the rain. And Alexia stopped, and she had a shawl on. She pulled the shawl off, and she just went over. We didn't even stop our conversation, really. She went over there and wrapped it around this guy and gave him a little blessing. And we just went, and she took up where she left off in the conversation. And I'm like, what? Did I just see that? Or did I dream that? Or what is that? I'm not saying it was her favorite shawl, but I mean, come on, there are limits to even anyone. But sometime around that same period of time, I was dating a woman who she was a chiropractor. And she had married the star of their chiropractic school. And he was very charismatic and good-looking. And he was also entrepreneurial and had put together a big practice and employed a lot of people. And he was the one step away from a chiropractic cult leader, it seems to me. But everybody loved and revered this guy. And she had been married to him before I came along. And he had begun to lose his mind. He had adult onset schizophrenia. And so Alexia was mentioning the having a home for somebody in your heart. Well, she was that place for him. So we would be hanging out sometimes, and he would call. And so she would take the call, and she'd go into the other room, and I'd hear the conversation, right? And she'd be just trying to link him back down to earth because he'd be having some kind of episode. And I thought, what a terrifying thing that would be when you can't trust your own mind anymore. That really had a big effect on me. And so a lot of people who are out on the streets and in treatment and in other places, they can't trust their own minds anymore. So I wrote this song, and it's set, at the time he had a beach house, and I imagined that there was, there was like a condo or something. And I imagined a beach community in my mind, and I was just, and it was more like San Pedro used to be, more than like Ocean Avenue. The song's called Ocean Avenue, but more than the Ocean Avenue that's very tony and runs along Palisades Park up there. It was more like a harbor town that I was thinking about, sort of. So anyway, it's called Ocean Avenue. Is my guitar in the mix? Here comes little John in his boho dress. He's knocking out a rhythm on his hip with a rolled up poetry rack. And there's Mrs. Wu with her parasol Round Guatemalan women on the bus stop, reading People en Español. They all got big doings, everybody up and down the block, important people waiting for 'em, with a one eye on the clock, except the floating few, like me and you, washing up like driftwood all along Ocean Avenue. Ocean Avenue. I once loved a girl, her skin was smooth as silk, kindness flowed from her fingertips like mother's milk. Ah, but I drove her off an inch at a time. That was either just before or maybe a little after I lost my mind. Now I put myself to bed at night, pray the Lord my soul to keep, pull my knees up tight against my chest, till my voices let me sleep, till the walls roll back and let me through, to drift along the rooftops above Ocean Avenue. Feel free to join me. Ocean Avenue, Ocean Avenue, Ocean Avenue. My mother was a beauty, filled with darkness and joy. She'd whirl me round and stand me on a chair, say, look at my sonny boy. He can be anything he wants to be. Yeah, but even then the knots were working loose inside of me. Now I stand before her picture on my wall, behind the glass of better times. The light shifts and it's only me there, with eyes as flat as dimes. I miss my mom, I miss my daddy too, safe beneath the green grass, far from Ocean Avenue. Ocean Avenue, Ocean Avenue. Keep that going. Ocean Avenue, Ocean Avenue. Na 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 na. Ocean Avenue. Thank you to the Ocean Avenue dancers.
Only get this certain feeling when it's Dave who's singing. Yes. Like, it doesn't happen anywhere else. I don't know what it is, some kind of magic. Anyway, we're going to invite, yes, Alexia up here. Yes, and Dave, yes, Dave up here. Come on up. Yes, you. He might ask you a lot of questions. And,
Is that me?
yeah, this is you. And I'm going to give you this one. You guys can share.
So Alexia has to play guitar next time.
No, I will dance, but I won't play guitar.
All right, so this is a time for community sharing, and what that means is you get a chance to make a statement or ask I think there's a few.
There's a lot of response. That's great.
Let's just start right here.
When you were talking about the homeless issues, it sort of got me thinking of, I think it was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, the mayor, Karen Bass, started the Inside Safe program to get, the homeless people, off the streets into, housing that provided for them and trying to get the mental health, help that they really needed. And I think it's been quite helpful because the percentage of homelessness sort of went way down since that program had started.
I would have a couple just quick responses, and Dave might have one also. I've known Karen for many, many years, long before she was mayor, Karen Bass, and she has a great heart. She told me the other day that she had no idea how difficult, almost impossible it would be to be the mayor of the city. So she said that she came in idealistic, and that there were so many turf wars, and that the zoning regulations and the way that those zoning regulations are maintained and fought for in this city. And it sort of goes on and on and on in terms of all of the difficulties. With all those difficulties, they've still made some progress. But I think that the most effective thing they've done is support these tiny homes. Do you want to say something about this?
I had something to say.
You were overwhelmed by my eloquence. Just imagine we're talking in the
Yeah, we've seen a lot of efforts which takes, get people, take them off the street and put them into housing. And I think that why we're so interested in the transitional housing is that we have this sense that that when you're on the street, you become, the way I look at it, is a little bit feral. Because you're always looking for somebody to roust you. Sorry man, you got to move on. You always feel a little ashamed of yourself. You don't really want to catch people's eyes. You hope that nobody notices you if you're sleeping in the bushes or whatever. And so, Ken Kraft, the guy who runs what used to be Hope the Valley and is Hope of the Valley and is now Hope the Mission, when they first started that, they went and he and his partner, when they started the nonprofit, they went out and spent a week on the street with only $5 to each of them had $5, and he said, I guarantee you, it's almost impossible. He told this to our crowd the other day. He said it's almost impossible to stay sober and sane when you're out there, because you don't know anything about what's going on. You are strict survival mode, and all those, you can't sit around self-reflecting on your place in the world and what are my dreams? You are just, where's the bathroom? Where's the next meal? Is anybody after me? Is that sketchy character still following me from the camp? And so, he really stresses the magic of these tiny home things is, though they are small, 64 square foot, they have a locking door. And he says and people just like, and it takes weeks or months for them to really become who they wanted to be before they lost that last job or whatever it is and they slipped. I mean, you know, we're always going to see this problem because people don't have any money. Yeah. You know, we live in a place where and I don't want to make a speech about this, but one thing that Alexia didn't mention in that same time frame is that we started losing union jobs to a tremendous amount, and people then lost their pensions. Yeah. And so what happened at the same time is Bob Vila had a very popular show about how to flip houses, and we saw all this, and people started thinking, I need to get a house, and it needs to be my retirement money. And so that means I need for my property values to go up. So the idea is my mother was a realtor. The idea with people who wanted to improve a home was to get the worst house on the best block and then build it up to look more like the other houses and meet the property values. And so you look at the people that we, you know, in shorthand we call NIMBY, not in my backyard, but you can understand in the world that we've created where we don't have a pension system really, other than that, you know, Social Security, which, you know, may not last, but you can understand why people would be defensive of their property values, and it's just a really tough thing to deal with. But I took you off topic, but I agree with you that any time we can get people off the streets, but sometimes it's counterproductive to put them into permanent housing in a neighborhood before they're ready.
I'm going to bounce around a little bit. I'm going to go front, back, over there, up there. Okay, so
I'm going to add one quick comment too, just very quickly, which is that I just want to name that there is a national affordable housing crisis.
Yes.
That is extremely complicated, which is why I didn't go in and try to describe all the details of it. But it's a very hard thing to solve, and in a democracy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go in the.
Thank you for what you talked about today and your music. We lived in Westchester for 27 years, and about a year before what I'm going to tell you about, a man came to the door and said, I'm a painter, I can do some work for you. We had him painting, we had him, anything that we had, I would call him. And we began to trust him and treat him almost like family. Little by little, his car broke down, so he couldn't go look for jobs. And because he couldn't go look for jobs, then he couldn't pay for rent. So then he lost his apartment. And it was one thing after another. We gave him a bicycle. He would bike to appointments. And then the bike broke down, and then we paid for the bike, and on and on and on. Anyway, he disappeared. He found some family, and he went with them. And ironically, the next year, we were underwater on our mortgage. We could not pay our mortgage anymore. The bank took away our house. We had to move. And in the midst of all the getting rid of belongings and things to get into an apartment, we were trying to find another place to live, and we couldn't pay for anything else. We couldn't pay for anything else in the neighborhood where we lived. So we started looking around, and it was so difficult, and my husband didn't have work, and I was working, but it wasn't enough, blah, blah, blah. So I called my mother, who at the time was 83, and she lived in my childhood home by herself, 3-bedroom home, 2 baths. And I said, Mom, we're having this difficulty. We probably need just a couple months to find a place and to get our money together and all that kind of stuff. So can we put our stuff in storage and come live with you? And she laughed and said, oh, honey, you know we don't get along together. My mother turned us away. So at that moment, I knew what it felt like to be houseless. And it was very scary. And the fact that I had a job was the only reason that why we didn't go onto the street. It's the only reason. So when you think about the people who, and I had a salary, right? When you think about the people who are working in those, McDonald's jobs or at the car wash, and right now, with all the stuff going on with immigration and all that kind of stuff, I have 3 grandchildren, and I'm so grateful. When I sit with my son and their kids, and the kids are griping about how they're not getting what they want in the restaurant we're sitting in, all I can think about is the children that don't have enough to eat, and I'm watching all this food on the table. And so I know I'm spilling an awful lot out, but oh my gosh, there's so much going on in this country, and that's all I want to say.
Thank you. We're going to go online, and I want to mention while we go online that there's 2 people online who just had surgery, and yet here they are, Hurley Jim and Linda Bond. I'm so glad to see you guys. I wasn't sure we would. But we're going to go to Daria first because she's on the left-hand side. Daria?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate hearing about all the resources, and I just want to say from my own experience, which is the only one I can speak from, there is another side to the struggle with finding a home or finding a place to live that is sustainable and long-term and permanent. And that is, sometimes people forget their agency. They forget who they are. And I'm speaking from experience. And I think having gone through particular housing struggles myself, while never been on the street, I just want to lift up the reality that even when resources are in front of you, and even when you have access to private education, again, speaking from experience, you have access to literally everything you can imagine. If you lose touch with who you are and you lose touch with your humanity, nothing matters. You can't possibly begin to see the light under the bushel. And it has taken me many, many months to heal my own sense of agency. And while I know this sounds extraordinarily personal, I want to make clear that it's not just about policy. It's not just about handing somebody a number and saying, just call this person, just email that person. That individual needs to know the specialness of who they are before they can begin to do anything. And I want there to be more compassion and more understanding for the very deep individual pain that so many people are going through. And while I greatly admire our country's sort of subset culture of this idealized version of individualism, and we can do this and all this stuff, and I get all that, I'm also wanting some more profound understanding for, I guess, the struggle of this comparison, thinking that when one is given a lot and one still does not have agency or does not get in touch with that, there is such a profound disconnect. And yeah, I guess that's what I want to say. And I'm interested in learning more about the tiny house project, so hit me up. But thank you, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Dara. I know both Dave and I want to comment. I want to say that I would love to share with all of you the process that we came up with for helping people to regain their agency and to rebuild themselves. It's an intensive program. It was forged on the ground in the Philippines and the urban poor squatters areas. It worked here. And there's some elements that I feel are not rocket science, like immediate, but they're put together well. So for another time.
So, my turn. I'm an architect and have, in my practice, done mostly education facilities, but about 2 years ago, I got more involved in the American Institute of Architects. And it's sort of learning about how difficult the problem is in the housing problem, and it's like homelessness by 1,000 cuts. And I'm part of a profession that, I get a license for health, safety, and welfare. But a lot of the stuff we do makes it much more difficult to build housing. And, you know, the tiny house, they don't have bathrooms, right? They don't, you know, and then you start to deal with accessibility, and you deal with this and that, and pretty soon, and zoning, and nobody wants them. So it is such a complicated problem, and it probably does go back to sort of that Prop 13 era and the me thing, and 60 years of little policies, everyone piling on the other one, that makes it much more difficult for people to have housing. And it, you know, it kind of every level. And I guess the point I wanted to make, and through being on the board of the American Institute of Architects, we've met with the mayor, we're doing things. It is a really difficult problem, but there is work going on in the city of LA to get one agency to talk to another, to simplify things, to, for example, allow architects to self-certify work so you don't have to go through 1,800 steps every time you do things. And that's not fixing the social side of it, it's not fixing the agency, it's not all of that other stuff. But I think, in strangely, the fires have kind of been a catalyst and an experimental ground for ways to do this right. Now, there's pressure, like, we want to spend all this money and bury all the utility lines. Well, that costs a lot of money. So there's pressures in multiple directions, but there is movement to try to make that process work a little better. And it's a long problem to solve, or a long-term one, but anyway, just wanted to say that. And thank you for everything else you were saying.
Let me just quickly respond to that. I mean, you know better than anybody how tremendously difficult it is to get anything going in terms of a building project. And one of the things that drew us initially to this tiny home thing, I first became aware of it during COVID when they put that one in at Chandler Avenue in North Hollywood, and it's sort of there's sort of a busing line there, and then there's Chandler going by, and it's an industrial street in that area. So it was this little wedge of land that nobody was really fighting for, and it was just sort of wasted. And you can find little chunks like that if you're looking all over Los Angeles. They're sort of where two properties come together or whatever, and you know, if it is an industrial area, then you don't really have the NIMBY problem. And you have a lot of, you know, I mean, I read recently that 29% of commercial buildings in Los Angeles are vacant. And some of those are factories. And some of those already are fenced. And they already have sewer lines. Like, one of the things they had to do with most of these things is the city comes in and the city puts the privacy fencing up, the city levels it all out, and puts in sewer lines and electric for the lighting and stuff like that. But they have to put in the sewer lines, and then they have these trucks that come in. And in LA, we have these because the movies use them. You know, you have sanitation trucks come in, and they have bathrooms, and they're built to be relatively easy to keep clean. You know, you can hose them down on the inside and stuff like that. So everybody, as you say, the little tiny houses themselves do not have bathrooms, so they're zoned differently, and they also don't have a permanent foundation, so that, you know, if you rake some gravel pretty level, you just set them down and you can build them in 90 minutes. And so it's brilliant that kind of the invention came out of private industry, and so you've got the industry, cities, and the nonprofit level all kind of working together, and we really like that. But you know better than I do about it, and I thought the same thing. It's a shame we had to burn down 2 cities to finally realize that maybe this doesn't have to be so onerous, this process.
Exactly. Wendy?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, because I had a friend that I helped that was homeless for 15 years, but I helped him get housing, and he got into a senior building on Culver in Inglewood. you know, for the NIMBYs, can you just say, oh, we're building a senior building? Because handicapped people and a lot of the people on the streets have mental or physical handicaps, and you could just put them in adult, you know, senior buildings, because they can go there, but and they don't have to be a senior. But yeah, and I don't know. I'm not going to go into my whole history, but you know, I was homeless for a while too. But that was chose to be, and I was a drug addict, but I always had family here. So you're right. You know, I had ties. I could go, you know, crash at my dad's house or my mom's place or even my boyfriend's place, and you know, it was a big help to have somewhere to go if you really needed it.
I think I want to say one statement. I really do want to answer your question, but I was trying to figure out how to say it in a few words because it's actually very complicated. So maybe we'll just figure out some time. We'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to describe what we did. But what I wanted to say is sometimes there's this battle between more conservative people and more progressive people, where the progressive people say it's just the lack of affordable housing. And then conservative people say it's just the weaknesses of people on the street, right? But what people, and then often progressive people respond by painting homeless people as saints. No, they're wonderful people, they have no problems, it's not their fault at all. The truth is that people that have housing have all the same problems. We don't have to pretend that homeless people are saints. No one is a saint.
Yeah,
it's
more inclusive.
right. Right. It's just that. It's just really the combination between whatever the level of your difficulties is and the level of your support network. It's that ratio that makes the difference. But then, of course, is what happens to people on the street. Craig has his hand up too.
Yeah.
So.
First and foremost, I applaud your effort because I know what this is. I was homeless. I had a job and was homeless. You know, which leads me to my next point. If you do business with a corporation that's based in Santa Monica, your minimum wage is $17.81. Minimum wage. The average cost of an apartment in Santa Monica is $2,600. That gives you $160 to do everything else. You want cable? $100. Food? Well, clothes? So I mean, you know, and I think what you guys are describing, I think is something that has reached into a war that's tribal. On the one hand, you have landowners, landlords, and on the other, you have people who are in need. I'll comment back on the idea that when we look at how much we pay in taxes, not just to the federal, but to the state as well, there's a tremendous amount of wealth to address any and all problems, if indeed the values are right. I guess my question to you, Alexis, is, within your, I guess you could say, assessment, do you ever more or less subscribe greed to the idea that this is something that has us climbing the wall? And I say that to say, essentially, whenever we look at, let's say, if we have rent control, the thing goes up, and it's not capped. But rent is never capped. There are so many things that are capped when you win a case. You can only make so much money, but rent is never a part of that equation. And so I'm just questioning specifically how much people recognize that what we're dealing with is greed,
Remember,
well.
one of the slogans of the me generation was that greed is good. That it's not that human beings have never not had to deal with this problem, but there have been times and places where there was more of a social contract, where people understood that what's good for all of us is good for each of us. And that we lost that in the me generation. But I'm also aware, as an old hippie, that in the hippie generation, we took apart a bunch of the traditional structures, and some of them were good structures, and then never replaced them. So that, that is part of what we're dealing with nationally. But that is also, when I made that little comment about how hard this is to solve in a democracy, it's because you have to really change people's values to change their vote. And so you really have to work on multiple levels at the same time. So it doesn't mean it's impossible, and we do make progress.
I mean, just the mere concept that it has to be a growth economy. You always have to be making more money this year than you did last year, or you're some kind of failure. And, Craig's 100% right. I have so many conservative friends that live in other places, and they'll say, "Oh my God, out there, it's full of these socialists." And I said, "Well, we got some socialists. They're not the problem. Yeah. This is the most avaricious state of any country on earth. Silicon Valley." That's where the billionaires are coming from, and how many times have we celebrated movie stars because, hey, they just got $20 million to make one. That's for 6 weeks' worth. What a winner! We measure everything out here by how successful people are, how famous they are, how well, and then people stream in here. It's like a bug light for a-holes. People come, they come streaming in here. I want to go out there and compete with the worst of the worst. But they think they're all the winners in the world. They think, I can be a winner too. And you have all these calm little countries. I don't really miss those people that went to LA that much, and...
Okay, so we're going to go to Linda. I know there's like 3 or 4 right here, too. So we're going to have Linda and then like 3 or 4. I didn't miss
And you write such beautiful, eloquent music.
Yes, he's very articulate. I like that.
Uplifting.
Okay, Linda is online, and Linda just had a surgery as well. Go ahead, Linda. Welcome.
Thank you. I want to say first that I'm grateful to be part of this community and to be able to be recovering from surgery. I had my left shoulder replaced last week, and I'll be back eventually. But I'm here today, and I think sort of what I have to say follows up quite neatly with the last comments. I think, as someone who's been a communist for more than 50 years, I would say that I see with the younger generation an understanding that it's the collapse of capitalism, not just union jobs, the mortgage crisis, all of that and more that people are facing, and that it's not, and that the people in Kansas that got the phone call, that your cousin is on the street, are dealing with that, right? And it is not lost on me that thousands of demonstrations did not take place after Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was murdered by ICE in Chicago, or when Keith Porter was murdered by ICE in Northridge, and that it took a blonde, a white woman, a beloved mother to be shot in the face, for thousands of people to come out and be done with this shit, right? And I think that I am heartened, but I am heartened. I am heartened by the fact that now, because of Renee Good, people know about Keith Porter, et cetera, right? And the dozens of other people who have been murdered by ICE this year. And that people are not saying, oh, well, shit, that's just the way it is, right? I think that we are in a moment where people can see that the individualism that capitalism requires is good for capitalism, but it ain't good for us. And that people are taking their empathy on the streets. And so I am hopeful. I am hopeful that people will make a systemic change. I mean, that's why I've been a communist for, like I said, 50 years.
Okay, does somebody else over here? Thank you, Linda. I thought I missed something.
My father was a psychiatrist, but he worked, people, I'd say that, oh, he must be rich, you know. He didn't work in private practice. He worked in one of those mental, it was, I can't talk. He worked in one of those, what we didn't have after this. Yeah, what we didn't have the asylums. Local, private, well, it was not private, but community-based program. And I'm so grateful I grew up around that, because it just really shaped how I thought about people and things. And the program that he worked for, they had psychiatrists, that was my dad, social workers, psychologists, clergy. It was just, you know, like you said, it's difficult. And you have to address all of that. And it was very effective. It was funded by the Mennonite Church. Grew up in Indiana. So, you know, I grew up with a respect for mentally ill people. And it has shaped my worldview. So those are very effective, and there are examples of it out there. And, you know, it really pained him to know that there weren't enough of those local community-based programs. So
people who were in the ecumenical chaplaincy to the homeless who were schizophrenic got much better. They still had good days and bad days, but they were productive, creative members of the community. And we just understood their bad days, and people had ways of dealing with it.
yeah, they had housing, halfway houses, all kinds of programs.
And, you know, we have such a complicated society now, and everything happens so rapidly that I myself am not competent in this society. I painted houses because it was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I could concentrate on something for 3 weeks, but beyond that I started getting freaked out, you know, and so I was willing to work for, you know, largely working class widows whose husbands had always painted the house. Now I was the new guy. And I would spend all this time trying to give the most value for the least amount of money. And I'd meet other contractors in the paint store, and they'd go, and their estimates on houses were insane. I go, what are you talking about? Well, I only have to get a few of them because, you know, and everybody drives it up. They think that they have to prove with their income that they're worthy in a society like this. And if you are not even technically mentally ill, but just not really good with complicated systems, you struggle.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Dave for the first song, what Christmas Eve is like in Shantytown. I'm thinking of, I'm looking at some documentaries about space-time and the whole concept of space-time. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and there's a place in Trinidad near to the capital city that we call Shantytown. Everybody in Trinidad knows where Shantytown is in Trinidad. And especially during the Christmas time, sometimes family members would say, I wonder what they're doing now, Christmas Eve day in Shantytown. And here it is now I'm hearing that song. But there's a young lady, about 26, who grew up in Shantytown, lived in Shantytown, but she had the opportunity and the education, I think, and the mindset to be able to live elsewhere in better communities. But she stayed in Shantytown. And many times you would hear her on the radio or some other places protesting against the conditions and saying, well, Shantytown is going to, Trinidad is going to be like Shantytown because so and so and so. Are there persons who prefer to live in shantytowns as a form of protest? Just as a form of protest.
At times there have been. I mean, I've known people who did that. The Catholic worker movement, and I was a Catholic worker for 7 years, is a very intentional movement of people to either stay, not leave, or to join them. And live at a level of the community. Right. And to understand that that's one of the most effective ways to improve a community is to live at the same level as the people in the community. So I've been part of that in my life for a number of years with my daughter when she was little. But I think there's very few people in a greed-based society who are willing to do that now. But there are young people all the time. When you were talking about being heartened by young people.
And as long as you stay living with the poor people, you only have to be a little bit richer.
Exactly.
Right? If you go move into the country club crowd, now you got problems because now you could be rich and still be the poorest guy on the block.
All right, we're going to go to Hurley Jim online.
Yeah, glad to be able to join you all.
Can you see it?
Had corneal surgery earlier in the week, and the fact that I'm here, has a lot to do with your prayers and support. And I got a call from Izzy and Wendy this morning, and that advanced my healing by light years. I am overwhelmed by your eloquence, Alexia, but I think you know that. And also Dave, I'm overwhelmed by your eloquence, both in music and just talking. And I'm not just talking actually about your words, but your lives, the eloquence of your lives. Thank you. And I've been thinking a lot about the way we approach homelessness, houselessness. I think a lot of the home aspect is really belonging. We're trying to solve this. Well, I think you two are probably, you are on this, but a lot of the official policies are tearing apart the sense of belonging. You know, an encampment may develop, a little community. And then what do? We disperse them. We don't value that sense of community. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more than that. I just want to hold that out.
Thank you, Lily Jim. Okay, we got one more, Marty.
Thank you, everybody here today. I thought everybody's comments were great. I loved your Ocean Avenue song. And Alexia, thank you for bringing up such an important topic. I just want to quickly say that a lot of my social structure is homeless people. I hang out with them. They think I'm homeless. I've been connected with the Venice houseless for years and have been in a few Venice homeless groups. And a couple of quick things is I tell people, they go, oh, the homeless, they're all crazy, they're lying in the street. It's not true. Most of the homeless, I think, are just like us. They just don't have and I hate using the word homeless. We usually say houseless. Most of these people do have homes. They're tents, they're huts that they put up. And I loved you bringing up the Philippines. I'm quite aware of some of the shanty towns there too. And the big difference, I think, between LA and the Philippines is, maybe you can correct me, but in Manila, they seem to let the shanty towns exist. They're out there a few miles out and they build up the, but here we had a shanty town being built in Venice at the beach during the COVID that didn't allow them to tear them down. And we had a Philippine-style shanty town starting to come up here, but then soon after the COVID, the city said no more, and they came and they said, oh, we're getting rid of the homeless. I said, no, these people have their homes, their tents and their sheds are their homes. They're houseless. Now you're making them homeless. They took their tents, threw them in the trash, broke down their huts, and they had to go. So one quick last point is, like I said, I'm with the homeless all the time, and they have a dichotomy between themselves. One is that there are people coming in, homeless people, houseless people that have lived here a long time, as opposed to drifters who come in. And those are the ones who are really homeless. These other people here, a lot of them live in their vans and trucks. That's a whole other side, that there's a large number of people in their vehicles, and they tend to be okay. Some of them have jobs, but like a couple of people said here, it's just not enough money. If they get a regular job, $15 an hour, you can't afford a house, so they're living in their vehicles. And we need safe parking. It's something we've been talking about for years. We need places for them to park their vehicles, that they're not being towed, that they can have a bathroom there for them to use, or some cleaning facilities. So we need safe parking, and we need areas that they can build their shanty towns and not being ripped out. We should go to these shanty towns and build bathrooms for them and laundromats so they can exist, just kind of like in the Philippines. Unfortunately, maybe correct me, but some of the shanty towns, the only problem I really see there is the sanitation seems to be bad. And that was one of the problems we've had here at the beach too with the shanty town here, was the sanitation. But the city would come in with their garbage trucks and try to keep it clean here. So, and this was one of the, last point, one of the groups I was in, it's called the Renaissance, and we had been dealing with, it was both homeless and housed, and we were trying to keep these people who were there to make sure that their areas were clean, that they would try to make them look nice, maybe put up some flowers in front of their little huts and tents to make, so that neighbors wouldn't feel so put out by them. One of the great points of Daria was about compassion. And my other thing I keep seeing is a lot of the house people have a hatred to these people, which is terrible. Instead of having compassion for them, feeling bad, oh God, they're out, they got nothing to eat, where are they going to go? No, they hate them. Get them out of my neighborhood. We're trying to build a housing here on Pacific, maybe you people are familiar, and the neighbors are just fighting. Not in my neighborhood. They don't want to put it somewhere else. Anyway, that's all I want. Thank you very much.
Wow, there's so many things we could say in response.
Yes.
Marty, there's so many things I think we could say. I just going to be very quick because I know we're way over time. But it's been a rich conversation, right? The first thing I want to say is it's not an ideal situation in the Philippines, in the urban poor squatters areas and the shanty towns. They do, at regular intervals, bulldoze a part of them. if they want to use the property for something. But people do resist. People make these human shields, and sometimes they die in the process, and sometimes they win, right? Where there's a particular area that they're going after, and then they decide to do it or not to do it, depending on the level of resistance. The biggest issue in shantytowns is no services, no sanitation, and no security. Remember, if you can't lock a door, if you've got a tent, it's pretty easy to rob or hurt you. So homeless people don't have a higher level of criminality, but they have a higher level of victim, right? So shantytowns are not ideal. Nobody wants to live there. It's just an option. What I do think you've pointed out that is accurate is that we need to make space in our current situation for alternative housing options that are permanent. And the safe parking initiatives they rezoned in Pasadena for safe parking so that churches could do it. Pasadena's ahead in a lot of these things, but we could do that in the city of LA. We could rezone for safe parking initiatives. And then you do need to provide some level of services just like you would for anybody else.
They're working on it in San Juan
right. So I think you wanted to say.
Just a real quick statement with Marty on that is, I don't know if anyone's aware of the van life. You know, it's kind of a cool factor thing. For a while there, I used to go camping with these people. They're nomads. They live nomadically, and they've got their vans and things squared away, and they know how to deal with their sanitation. And so it can be done. You know, a lot of them shower at a gym they all belong to and things like that. So you know, there is a little bit more forbearance now with the people who are living in RVs and things like that. I live in an RV myself, but you know, it's permanently docked. But there's a little bit more forbearance. But if the city would simply make a dumping station available, then somebody whose tanks are getting full can swing through there and dump their stuff. They don't want to dump it on the street. But you got to work with them a little bit. They're living in a system that isn't serving them, and they're trying to make the least mess possible. At least, you know, try to delineate the people who have a direction and some resources and give them a hand. Anyway.
All right. Well, let's give them a hand. Say thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's obviously it's very rich. Everybody, we all want to speak. I wanted to say more about the Philippines myself, but I think we'll leave it at that. And we're going to have a moment of silence, and then Dave is going to sing a song, right?
I can cut my last song.
No. We need a song, Dave.
We were talking about, and I'm glad I'm going to do this song now. This was the other song that was coming to me, and the songs were fighting in my head for, you know, no me. I do a lot of hiking around the Highland Park area, and I had noticed one day that I saw this guy, and he was obviously in work clothes, young guy, and he cut through a fence on the back slope of Dobbs County Park over there, Dobbs Regional Park, and it was going off into the wilderness, and I knew that he was going up there to a home, you know, to a home that he'd made, a little house that he'd made. And, you know, it doesn't take that many bad chunks of luck to put you without resources and without a job. So this song kind of came together in my head. It's a little bit wordy. Try to follow the story. I hope it's not too bad. I don't remember my first dad. He left before memory came. They say he gave me my blue eyes, but I never did get his name. My second daddy was on and gone. I was only in the second grade. I do not believe my mother ever recovered from the mess he made. If I could just get one lucky break, I'd be back on my feet again. I promise that I'll pay it forward to the next unlucky man. Show me a little faith, throw me just a little grace, and I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. My third dad, he was my real dad. I'd follow him everywhere, hand him a tool as he fixed up his work truck, jacked up high in the air. On the side it just said Apex, for all of your welding needs. With the torch or a TIG or a halogen rig, he could draw you a beautiful bead. Cancer got him and it got him bad. He was never gonna live out the year. I spent my last weeks of high school watching my hero disappear. He cried a little on that last night for all he tried to do but never could. I said, don't worry, Pop, I got this. And he closed his eyes for good. If I could just get one lucky break, I'd be back on my feet again. I promise that I'll pay it forward to the next unlucky man. Show me a little faith, throw me just a little grace, and I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. So I hired on apprentice with Walker Fabricators, but they let me go in the spring. Something about taxes on Chinese steel and robot welders and every damn thing. So I went with Chuy Rodriguez. I was low man on the totem pole. Gave all but a little to my mom for the house, but we never got out of the hole. If I could just get one lucky break, I'd be back on my feet again. I promise that I'll pay it forward to the next unlucky man. Show me a little faith, throw me just a little grace, and I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. An eviction notice ain't the kind of thing a grown woman ought to hide from her kid. But she knows I'm as stubborn as her, so that's exactly what she did. Chuy dropped me home, the place was cleaned out, except the note that she left for me. Said, I'm chasing the movers in your daddy's truck, I'll see you out in Tennessee. If I could just get one lucky break, I'll be back on my feet again. I promise that I'll pay it forward to the next unlucky man. Show me just a little faith, throw me just a little grace, and I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. So I got a little camp on a flat spot on the back slope of Dobbs County Park. I'm the earliest bird at the work drop, and I walk back in after dark. But it's New Year's Eve in the land of the free and the home of the billionaires. I sat by my blue tarp palace, watched the bombs bursting in air. If I could just get one lucky break, God damn it, I'll be back on my feet again. I promise that I'll pay it forward to the next unlucky man. Show me just a little faith, throw me just a little grace, and I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. I'll be back up on my feet in no time at all. Thank you all for having us.
My turn. I'll just be quick because this has been amazing. But thinking about this place as our home, we need to keep it going. So anything you can do is helpful so that we've got a place. So thank you. Quick.
What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, we are leaning, safe and secure, all alarm. Leaning, we are leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, we are leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, we are leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms.
So we do not have bread, but we do.
Let's make a circle. Make a circle. 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 In 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1.
Yay! All right.
Way down inside of me, I got a fire going on. Way down inside of me, I got a fire going on. Part of me wants to sing by the light, and part of me wants to cry, cry, cry. Let's try that again. Way down inside of me, I got a fire going on. Way down inside of me, I got a fire going on. Part of me wants to sing by the light, and part of me wants to cry, cry, cry. And part of me wants to cry, cry, cry.
And we're just going to say carry on together. Raise our hands up and unmute yourself on Zoom if you want to say it with us. 1, 2, 3. Carry on! Carry on!